Yay!
Yay!
Go on.
What was the song there?
It's called just got paid. I think. It's a old ZZ Top tune.
State Highway
Got
340.
paid. Yeah, I think that's what it's called.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's one of
groovy.
the obscure ones that probably should be much more famous than it is.
Right,
You know,
right. It happens.
some of the greatest songs ever written are
Yeah,
not the ones that are known or hit the charts. You know. So,
I know. People say that.
well,
Were they really that great, or
yeah.
they just no one knew about them, or the
No
DJ didn't play them on the radio station?
There you go. Yeah.
It could happen.
Back in the day, it was about the DJ, right? If the DJ and the radio station didn't want to play your stuff, they just
In
didn't
2
play it.
miles, take the exit towards State Highway.
Yeah. So your DJ was early marketing
Yeah.
for music, for bands.
They were your gatekeeper, and so you needed Radio 3.0 to basically put that whole thing in the hands of the consumer, right? So maybe that was
That's right.
Spotify. That was Radio 3.0. Like
There you go.
This whole Web 3.0 thing.
So
To
it all,
democratize and decentralize the DJ function.
so it all takes you back to marketing, doesn't it? Awareness.
Yeah.
You know, you can die on the vine, even if it's the greatest song ever, if no one's ever
Yeah.
heard of it.
Yeah, well, same goes with technology, right?
Yep.
A lot
Most
of
startups fail.
Well, I mean, think about it. How did Betamax lose to VHS? I mean, the friggin' VHS
Yeah.
cassette was gigantic, and if you remember how big the Betamax cassettes were, they were much smaller, and higher quality, right? But
And in the last format wars, Sony was determined that they were not going to lose this time, because Sony has put out a lot of pseudo proprietary
yeah,
formats, and so
yeah,
if people remember Blu-ray versus HD DVD,
yeah,
and Sony was like, we're going to put all our muscle because we own a movie studio and we can get
Yeah.
a lot of content.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a pretty interesting battle. And of course, you get to that, but in the end, arguably the last solid or whatever format where you actually have it offline, everybody's streaming now.
Yeah, yeah.
Take the exit towards State Highway.
Yeah. But
Um,
yeah, if you think about it, the Blu-ray thing didn't really last all that long. I mean, people were just downloading good enough content. As soon as you're able to stream things on or download videos onto your computer and watch it from your computer,
yeah,
people that was good enough. You didn't need 1080p. That's really what Blu-ray did, right? That brought like that whole 1080p thing and HDTV to vogue.
right.
There's something to be said about good enough. It's weird.
Yeah, because you're right. Even though you have purists who want the best, turns out that's a much smaller group of people than it maybe is worth your time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And oftentimes cheap, practical, and whoever already has like the distribution channels, the go-to-market channel setup. Those are the ones that win. But it's pretty remarkable that Blu-ray won out, if you think about it, because to your point earlier about Sony, they pushed a lot of proprietary stuff. I mean, even their memory cards. Remember the little
it's those memory sticks, whatever. Yeah.
And that was actually one of the reasons why I oftentimes didn't buy. I bought Canon and other brands for cameras or camcorders because the Sony stuff, it's like, what the hell is this?
Yeah. Well, and Sony was always often the most expensive gear a lot of times. In film and stuff like that, and photography and other things. But yes, I totally remember memory sticks. I remember having Sony cameras with those things. I remember using those. Have anyone had the PSP handheld gaming device,
Yeah,
which I loved? And remember, they created yet another proprietary format for that. They had the UMD discs to play games. They even they even made movies on those. And so I remember flying on airplanes like we do and watching movies on my PSP with the UMD. Sony obviously, but Sony, they were so dominant for so long.
They were the Apple of their time, or they were. I mean, Apple is the Sony of our time. Is really
that's exactly the right way to frame it. Absolutely. They had the Walkman. Then they made the Discman, which I don't know if that got much adoption.
No, the batteries didn't last too.
And then they made mini discs.
Yeah.
And so a lot of innovation at Sony, but it is interesting to think that Apple is the Sony of our time. Yeah. And I've read stories. I forgot the name of the guy who basically, I don't know if he retired or left Sony, but he was kind of the magician.
Yeah.
That made so much of that happen there in Japan. It happens. Sometimes you lose that visionary.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden your giant machine, your multi-billion-dollar machine, you're like, how is it we're so dependent on one person?
Yeah.
Which obviously a lot of people felt that way or worried about that with Apple when Steve Jobs died. It's like, is the company going to die without this one driving force?
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the interesting thing, though. If you think about who sort of succeeded, so if you subscribe to this notion that Apple is today's Sony, the dominant player always seems to be sort of a walled garden-ish proprietary, vertically integrated company.
Yeah.
And they dominate for a certain period of time, and to be supplanted not by open, by another proprietary.
Right.
And so it's totally counterintuitive, or at least it runs against the grain of discourse where everyone is looking at open. And it's interesting. I get into a lot of conversations about open technology, open this and that, and it's weird how people really do talk past each other. Like open APIs. It's like, well, is it really open API, or is it you have a proprietary service and you're just exposing those services through an API that may not be standard based? It's not really open, but you're calling it open because you published it. You allowed it to be that proprietary service to be exposed, right?
Yeah.
And so there's that whole confusion, but that's something I think that open communities have to grapple with a little bit. I think probably the biggest open success story thus far has been like Linux.
Yeah. Well, just think. I remember for years and years, the Team Linux was always like, "Oh, we're gonna displace Windows any day now on the desktop," and it just never happened.
Still hasn't happened, right? So
no, it hasn't. In fact, what's the name? Stephen Vaughn. He's probably one of the most outspoken Linux guys and writers and everything. And he did post last week on LinkedIn. He's like, "Hey guys, Linux is never gonna catch up to Windows ever. It's just not going to happen." But Linux had success on the handheld. Android is a Linux system with a Java wrapper around it. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And so Linux certainly worked there. Linux is working in small things.
Yeah.
Microcontroller. The Raspberry Pi, small things like that. Linux on the server has arguably beaten Windows Server.
Yeah.
I
That's
mean, you think about, I remember just, being at Microsoft and us building Azure, and Azure is based on Windows NT and our hypervisor technology. And so it's Windows Server underneath the covers. And for the longest time, people are running services that are based on Windows Server. And then
mm,
little by little,
yeah,
Linux, hosting Linux in Azure supplanted Windows Server. It took a while, but
yeah,
Linux servers are the dominant,
yeah.
VM running on, so it's kind of ironic, but stuff happens.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think something like Linux, an operating system like Linux,
Turn right onto West
um,
40 Frontage Road.
finds a better home in, like, let's say, enterprise-ish kind of environments, right? Where you have a lot of dollars that can go into supporting not only the community,
Use the left lane to
when
take
it's
slight
deployed and
turn.
implemented in a data center or what have you. There's enough capital to make it, hide a bit the complexity, and also
Stay to the
to,
left.
make it enterprise grade, which is what Red Hat did,
1.6 miles.
right?
Take exit
So
Yeah.
it's not that it's free. Everyone has this idea that open technology is somehow free and doesn't come with cost, but to harden it and make it a certain grade, even consumer grade,
Yeah.
it costs money. And so your whole example of Android being based on Linux is because a company like Android is, I mean, Google is backing the thing, right? And they've taken that base open technology, or that software, and they've layered on uh, a number of services and capabilities that make it consumer grade, right? But
Yeah.
out of the box, nobody wants to deal with any of that crap. They've Google has invested a lot in making it
Stay
simple
in the
or
middle lane.
completely thoughtless. You don't even think about it. It's just Android, right? And
Right.
just assume it does everything that Windows would do on a small device like that, and that's what Microsoft has done with Windows. It's just, it comes with your computer and you don't think twice about it unless it loses
Right.
your data. you know?
People don't want to know. They just want it to work.
Yeah,
Just let it,
yeah.
Yeah. It's
So,
funny. I remember thinking back with Steve Jobs talking about the iPhone, and people are like, "Hey, when are you going to let Java run on the iPhone?" He's like, "Never. Java is crap. Java is slow. Java is a horrible user experience. It will never run." Oh, when are you going to let Flash run on the iPhone? Never.
yeah.
It's bloated. It's slow. It's a horrible experience. And of course, it was so hacked.
Yeah.
Flash got hacked to death. Steve wanted the perfect, best user experience for the iPhone. And
Yeah.
so it's like, no, this is the only way you're going to be able to build apps that are going to deliver the experience that's good enough for me to accept. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? Those are like sort of, because when you think about software development or systems development, often what you oftentimes hear, and this is weird to hear from CISOs sometimes, say, hey, or security vendors, not CISOs, security vendors, and they say, hey, look, our we support DevSecOps processes and we do zero trust and blah blah blah, but we do it in a way that doesn't get in the way of innovation. And it's like,
Straight.
well, maybe sometimes you should get in the way of what you think or call innovation, because it's like some of this innovation it goes in a creepy direction, right? So what we've seen with a lot of what's happened with digital marketing tech, straight up surveillance. These systems are surveillance systems. That's what they are. We just don't call it them because, well,
Right.
we don't do surveillance, right?
Yeah.
But they're surveillance systems, and when you look at it from a privacy perspective, especially, and security perspective in a broader context, not just system security, but let's say societal security or personal security, these things all create, vulnerabilities and attack vectors to our person, our digital person, right? And it takes guts, I think, and certain type of principles to say no and go in a counter direction, right?
Right.
And anyway,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think a lot of that is sort of what IoT is also facing, right? Because security oftentimes is that bugbear in solutioning conversations, right? That's like,
Right.
"Wow, but we can't do that because it's not secure." Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what's all the big news this week? What's going on in tech, man?
Geez.
I saw that.
Um,
I saw the Raspberry Pi people put out a new version of their microcontroller where their RP whatever 20 blah blah blah.
uh-huh.
We'll get flamed for that. Anyway, their microcontroller, the Pico, that they've been doing, and they just came out with a version that includes Wi-Fi and Bluetooth,
Uh-huh.
um, and it's $6. It's a
Mhm.
microcontroller, so kind of like when people do stuff with Arduino or other microcontrollers. Unlike a big Raspberry Pi that's running Linux, but I think they've made good strides in getting into that microcontroller space. Friend, our good friend, wow, a McLaren just drove by me. I don't know if you can
Oh,
see that.
wow.
It's
I don't know.
Wow.
It's
I
gorgeous.
wish we were right next to it. Actually, gosh, McLarens are so gorgeous.
Like coming up.
Sorry about that. That's hot. Yeah. Yeah, our good friend Rick, I know he loves to jump on and comment.
Yeah.
And it's always something really positive.
Oh.
Um, yeah, it,
Always.
yeah, absolutely. But he was like, it was kind of like, what the heck is Raspberry Pi doing microcontrollers? That's kind of a mixed message or branding or problem, because everybody thinks of their single board computer running Raspbian or whatever they call it now, their Linux. Which is great for hobbyists. That's where it started. It was designed for education, but people use the Raspberry Pi now for on the edge gateways, edge stuff. It's got enough horsepower for some things. But he thinks it's a confusing mixed message for them also to be in the microcontroller space.
Mm.
I don't have a problem with that. People should be able to do whatever they want, as long as they're not stretching themselves too thin.
Yeah. I mean, these technologies always evolve into opportunities, right? But going back to what we said before, I mean, I'm sure Rick's concern, a lot of it probably has to do with security and durability, reliability, et cetera, right? Things that are you would typically attribute to industry hardened, industry grade appliances or devices. But if Raspberry Pi can do what they do, cool. And if it's open, cool. But somebody still has to come in and make it like what we said before. You still got to make it industrial grade, right? Just because it's Raspberry Pi doesn't mean that it is that,
Right. You're right. It's not.
So,
It's still intended for hobbyists or education and
but,
people to learn how to do that.
but I don't
I
think
think
for very long.
they may want to go in, and I know there are companies that do some hardening and make
Yeah.
more industrial-ish Raspberry Pis. But we saw Arduino, which was also, about education and learning and teaching people how to build stuff. And obviously, they are in the microcontroller space. And people started using Arduinos to build all kinds of
Oh,
stuff. And so Arduino in the last year they're kind of their pro line,
Yeah.
and they're going after the industrial IoT space.
Yeah. I mean,
same guts underneath, stuff
right.
that if you already know how to program an Arduino, then you're good to go.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense. And anyway, I think we need all the help we can get with people building devices and sensors right now, just with all the shortages and stuff. And so,
Yeah.
if you can take something that people have learned, I'm not going to say that it's because it's easy or because of whatever, but familiar, and then make the industrial version of that so that people can have that jumping
Yeah.
off point. I think it's all good.
You just need a red hat, industrial red hat of Arduino and NetDuino and Raspberry Pi and all of these other, what were typically or have been typically considered like hobbyist technologies, right? I mean, you might use it to prototype something, but eventually those things, like you said, become so robust and capable that it's like, why the hell not use them?
Yeah.
Take advantage of the open aspect of it. But the opportunity is having a group of folks build a business around open technology, right? And then start battling it out,
Yeah.
that level, and then, the competition becomes not about, whether it's Raspberry Pi or Arduino or what have you. It's about how do we put out the most reliable implementation of this stuff and take it to market and then make it something that's viable,
Totally.
element of an IoT system, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Weird how we always somehow figure out, like, we start off with something and then we end with something that's really pretty insightful. It's like weird. I don't know how that happens. It's kind of cool.
It is kind of cool.
Yeah. Hey,
It is
dude.
kind of cool.
So, dude, tell me, where are you guys now? Are you guys out of Washington? Are you in Idaho or something?
Oh, that was a long time ago.
Oh, no way.
So last weekend we were in Santa Fe.
What? Oh,
We did
wow.
Yeah. So we were in Washington last time we talked to you,
Oh.
driving to Idaho.
It feels like yesterday. That's why.
Yeah, but that was recording this last week. So in that time we made it to Santa Fe, spent a whole weekend in Santa Fe,
Yeah.
and then visited some friends in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that was fun, and spent a couple days up there.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people don't know how awesome Tulsa is. A lot of props to Tulsa. If you're a fan of Art Deco architecture and stuff from the 20s, 30s, 40s,
Yeah.
there's
Wow.
a lot of buildings there that are still there, preserved. You can go check them out. It's pretty interesting.
That's awesome.
We're now in Texas, so we're just.
Ooh, you're hitting a nasty spot, man.
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I frozen?
No, it's all right. You're hitting a dead zone.
I hate dead zones.
Yeah, they suck.
Yeah. Anyway, heading up to Dallas to see my dad. So
Okay.
it's a short trip from Waco. So there you have it.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, next week we'll be doing this from Houston.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Right on. Well, you guys have made a lot of progress already. It's incredible.
We have. Yeah, we've had a lot of fun. It's been great seeing friends and family. I mean, to this, I think I have a feeling a lot of people, more than you realize, are doing the same thing right now.
Yeah.
This summer, busting out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're going on vacations. They're doing stuff they haven't done for the last 2.5 years, I think.
Yeah.
And they may, more of them than you realize, maybe doing it by car, even though gas prices are insane. It seems impossible.
Yeah.
But as you've been hearing, airline prices and thousands of cancellations have been making air travel, you can't count on it necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, we built out this whole trip that we're doing based on flying. We might have been in for a big surprise.
Yeah. You know what? There's so much more, I think, to a road trip. I went from San Diego up to Fairbanks, Alaska, and back down, and that was the most incredible trip. And like, you bump into these little towns that you'd never heard of. You would have never, ever in your life imagined that you would even visit. you're there and you discover incredible stuff. You know what I'm
Yeah.
And then it's also awesome when you hit these smaller towns and more desolate areas. Um, how as the world gets like smaller, meaning um, it's there's less civilization. There's less of the
Yeah.
intensity that we're always living in. You get closer and closer to basically yourself.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you can experience out there. And then the perspective, as you watch
Yeah.
people live in these environments and you interact with them, you talk to them and you kind of share in their life. It's like the craziest crap, dude. It's
It's
so
awesome.
it makes you think about your own life in ways that we are stimulated not to think. We just simply cannot think that way because we have so many distractions. And one of the cool things that I had an opportunity to do was, as I was coming back down, I was by myself, you know, totally by myself,
Yeah.
driving through hundreds of miles of like wilderness that probably hosted these hungry bears that would have probably broken into my car.
Yes.
I had a ton of food in there just in case I got stranded. Because if you
Right.
get stranded, you're screwed, right? A
Pretty
pickup
much.
would have to drive out 200 miles to pick you up and take you to the nearest, repair shop or whatever, a gas station.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. Self-sufficiency, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a thing.
You guys are getting just a slight taste of that.
Yes. But you definitely look differently in tech. And is tech really everything you need in life, or is it a distraction?
Yeah,
Is it
yeah.
is it everything? Have we made it bigger than it needs to be? I don't know. You're right. You visited all kinds of places, I'm sure, along the way that didn't have much tech at all.
Oh no, we ended up visiting all four, accidentally stumbling on all four remaining blockbusters on the way
The four
up.
remaining Blockbuster Video.
At the
Yes.
time, there were only four, and three of them were in Alaska. There was one in Washington.
One in Bend, Oregon. The last one.
Or yeah, in Oregon.
It's still there.
Yeah. And
Oh my gosh.
yeah, I remember driving past it and going, "Oh my God, is that a Blockbuster?" And then we stopped and we went in, and I had to go inside because it had been like
Yeah.
a decade since I'd been in a Blockbuster, and I used to love that experience actually, right? Because
Yeah,
you're
it's fun.
talking to friends there, and within your community, and you can have a chat about, oh, so what are you guys watching tonight? And I was like, oh,
Right.
but it was actually like a little bit of a social event to go to a Blockbuster.
That's a good point. You'd have people who worked there who had watched all these movies, and it was almost like
Yeah.
Amazon recommendations.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
well, if you like the Terminator, you're gonna love blah 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 or whatever.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, we
Yeah,
don't
I do
have
miss
any of
that.
anymore.
I think missing that. I mean, is that like just how we, replacing going to the mall and shopping or whatever with e-commerce?
Yeah.
Certainly there's a part of community or being out and about and seeing things and browsing,
Yeah.
that people like.
Yeah. I mean, think
Like a
about
library. Yeah. How
yeah.
many, we watched the death of all the bookstores, all the great bookstores and, Barnes and Noble's barely hanging on. All the independents got wiped out. Now there's some independents that are hanging on. Some are coming back because a lot of people go, I liked some of those bookstores that had like a coffee shop in them.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe
Experience. Yeah.
it was an experience. Absolutely. It was a great experience.
Yeah.
And you kind of miss that. Once we're all just in our pods in the matrix and everything happens electronically.
Yeah.
Transformation of everything, the best thing. I don't know.
Yeah, and the UTC Mall over here in San Diego. If you go there, there's all these folks that say, "Oh, the mall is dead." The mall, yeah, some malls are dying because the mall, the management or the mall owners didn't modernize or invest in, they're just milking the assets, right? But these folks, the Westfield guys that redid the UTC mall, man, kudos to them. Talk about creating a community gathering place, a place that people just
Yes,
go to eat, to shop, to have just be around people. I mean,
that's right.
packed all the time. You know what I'm saying? And so I don't think I don't think e-commerce has killed malls. Malls killed themselves just because the malls.
Yeah,
The mall that still have that sort of social or communal appeal still do really well, like the famous South Coast Plaza, still killing it. They didn't go anywhere. I mean, even
yeah,
the pandemic, they survived, and now you go to the parking lots, you can't find parking. So how are the malls dying?
yeah,
Getting killed by e-commerce.
yeah. But yeah, a lot of those malls that have gone more outdoors
Yeah,
have seen success. And
yeah.
you're right, they need that kind of gathering place. I just now came back. You were
I know.
frozen, so I was frozen. I watched my 5 bars go to 0
Oh, nice.
On a major
Yeah, the
freeway.
on a
handoff
major
didn't
freeway.
happen. Oh,
Hey, so you knew about? I remember you were at a Qualcomm event and they demonstrated the X70
yeah.
cellular module. Are
No,
we
they
going to get
announced
that?
it. They
They
announced
announced it.
Yeah.
Are we going to see that in the next iPhone or Android devices? Do you think?
Oh yeah, eventually, probably 2023 toward
So
the.
you don't think we'll see the X70 in the iPhone 14?
No, no.
It'll be the 65 or something like that, or
Yeah, yeah.
I gotcha.
Which is pretty. I mean, it's pretty good. I mean, right now we have what is it, millimeter wave in these things, right? We have
Yep.
millimeter, um, radio in there, and we barely use it. There's more capability in here from a RF perspective than we actually can use.
Yeah.
For the most part. So for most of us, even X60 is more than enough.
Yeah.
With the X70, you're just getting a lot of AI optimization. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Intelligent,
Yeah.
radio functions and stuff like that, and
Right.
modem
That makes sense.
optimization.
Have you seen some of the?
Huh?
You were probably the person popping up rumors again about the next iPhone having some satellite action going.
No, that was Rick.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the discussion like X65 supports satellite, some kind of something.
Yeah, I think it's band 65. It supports it. It can support that band. So, I mean, yeah, and Globestar is a company that was rumored. I believe they have a contract, if I'm not mistaken, with Apple to provide that service. So this is something Apple's been thinking about for more than a year.
Yeah.
So it's not. I mean, even though Rick brought it up, it's not news in terms of being new.
Yeah.
It's just most people might not know about it. And I saw articles come out almost 9 months after saying, "Oh, Apple is doing this." It's like, well, that's kind of last year's news.
Right. Right.
So, yeah. It'll
I
be
don't know.
cool, but
What's that?
it'll be cool if you get in trouble. If you're stuck in the middle of friggin' Alaska and you broke your leg or something like that,
Yes.
and you got stranded, then it would be helpful, But
I agree. I don't know if people remember in the late 90s, you started having people had sat phones.
yeah,
I remember knowing people had Ericsson satellite phones and stuff like that.
yep,
And that was a thing for a bit, like for specialized, if you knew you were going to some remote location around the world,
yeah,
get a sat phone.
yeah. I think this is going to be, reduced capability, if you will. It's really going to be for like messaging and things like that rather than
Yeah. But I think
voice.
it makes sense if I think it's good if every phone had some kind of satellite backup plan just for
Yeah,
emergencies.
emergencies, right, right. Yeah. I know. And so my mother went up, my sister went up to Alaska on a cruise, and actually, she got into a pretty big accident. She broke her leg,
Oh,
banged up her face, and I was thinking, wow, if this would have been in a more remote area, it would have been good for her to have that capability. And one of the things she was telling me is that they tried to call 911, or they did call 911, but they barely got a signal. They barely got.
okay.
So she could have actually died if it wasn't for the fact that there was at least one bar,
Yeah,
on the network that allowed them to make that emergency call. So
it's so true. So much of whether you're going to get rescued or not has to do with cellular coverage.
yeah, now that I think about it, oh my God, if it wasn't for the cell phone, my mother probably would not be here.
Yeah. Think about national parks you've been to, or forests, or ski resorts, or all kinds of places
Oh my
where
God.
there's just
Yeah.
your phone says no service or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're out. That's tough stuff.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about that before. About I remember going through a national park up near Tofino on Vancouver Island in Canada,
Yeah.
and just the idea of, man, even if you had a simple little box like a little Raspberry Pi with just a button on it, and it used LoRa just to send a little chirp
Yeah.
to like the ranger station.
Yeah.
And they already knew where the device is because they're not mobile. So when they planted the device, they had their GPS coordinates.
Yeah.
And so when they get a little chirp from that identifier for that device, they know it's an emergency.
Yeah. Well, even, dude, Mount Rainier, when you drive around there are these complete dead spots.
Yeah.
I think it's the southeastern side of the mountain. You literally have no connectivity,
Yeah.
zero.
Yeah. Right.
And
Right.
yeah, if you got stranded there, let's say your car had an issue or there was an accident, I mean, you're kind of screwed. So,
Absolutely.
and what is it? That Mount Rainier is about 100 miles from Seattle, right? I mean, it's not like it's
Yeah.
out in the middle of complete nowhere. you know?
Right. Right. It
So,
doesn't take much to not have coverage, though.
yeah, that's true.
Mobile operators just cover dense population centers. That doesn't mean they cover the land.
They cover where they can make money. Is what
Yes.
it goes down to.
Let's just cut to the chase.
Cut to the chase, yeah.
Where they can make money, and
ROI.
cover, because it costs a lot of money to build cell towers and backhaul networks and all the gear. And
Yeah.
if there's only 2 or 3 people using it, it's just not going to be worth it.
Yeah. Well, that's why. Yeah.
Shouldn't this be where the government comes in?
Yeah.
Like this new $1 trillion whatever, where we're going to provide
broadband
connectivity.
Yeah. Well,
It's like,
yeah. I mean, that's why you have the U.S. Postal Service, and it's a public-private entity. Otherwise, if there weren't tax dollars funding it, and making it shoring up the losses that it incurs every year, it's servicing
Postal Service,
non-profitable.
Amtrak.
Yeah.
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 Like you guys might be in the middle of nowhere. I mean, this one dude living out in the middle of nowhere, getting a piece of mail to him probably costs like $20 now. Because you have to drive at least 20 miles to reach them, right? And so it could be 20. It can cost 20. I mean, there are places like that in Alaska.
Sure.
And so just to get that one what is it, Amazon package out to that guy living between Fairbanks and Anchorage. it could cost like $40, $50 now.
I'd have to try.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Might have to get on a seaplane to some people, the bush planes and seaplanes and all that. It's
yeah,
like whatever it takes. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
They want to close the equity gap. That's what they're doing.
yeah, man.
I think I think we talked about this before, but it goes along the lines of, how they're promising to pay for this broadband for everybody. But we talk about how many moons ago, decades ago, the government decided to do the rural electrification program, and they brought electricity to every last house in place of business in the whole country, no matter how remote it was. Every remote farmhouse, every ranch, everything got electricity. And I know we've talked about how people tried to do Ethernet over those power lines. I guess that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But when I see all those power lines going to every last place, even if you couldn't figure out something clever like doing Ethernet over power cables, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to string along a strand of Ethernet or fiber or something along the existing lines and the poles.
And conduits, right.
Yeah. Because if you can get electricity to everybody, then we should be able to get broadband to everybody by hook or by crook. And it doesn't have to be high tech. It could just be, here's another wire that's next to the other wire.
Yeah. No, all that effort costs money. And nowadays you want to call anyone out to do even the smallest job, like unclog your sink. It costs $300 for a roll.
Yeah, but I think it's the government's job to do this. And this is that equity gap, the digital divide we talk about.
They talk about it in school.
And so if you want to get every kid, like when we do the elevator kids, we need to get connectivity to every kid so they can go to school, even if they have to go to school with their laptop. Mm. You're right. Private enterprise will never do this because it's too expensive. But it's something. But if it's a government initiative, just to lift up all the people who are not, because we clearly don't have a level playing field.
No, we don't. So
yeah.
Hey, I really got to jump. I have a call. So
okay.
But you guys drive safe. To all our IoT Coffee Talk listeners, thanks for listening this far. Hopefully you found the discussion insightful and interesting. And we will see you next week. But before then, please hit the like button, subscribe, and we look forward to rapping with you guys again next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. All right, guys.
Absolutely.
All right.
Adios.
Take care. Be safe.
See you on the other side. All righty.
See you in Houston.
Bye.